All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we got quite the video for you guys here today. So I've been watching well, people have been asking me to make a classic plus video. People started talking about it again. People are wondering where the heck it's at. Zaryu did like a poll on his stream. Guzu reacted to it. I looked at it, and we're going to talk about it. I've been wanting to make a Classic Plus video for a while now. I've got some new things to talk about, but there wasn't quite enough to talk about for me to actually make a video. More specifically, we got all these things to talk about here, but I didn't have really good solution proposals. But I think I've come up with a good solution proposal for problems that I can kind of see potentially coming down the pipeline, so we're going to talk about that today. I'm still learning Lua U. Got my ass kicked recently. I feel like I'm in context, coding context hell. Tween service, user input service, user input service literally tried to kill. No, it wasn't user input service that tried to kill me. It's function contact action service and mobile buttons. Anyways, learning C frames right now. Thank God it's much easier. Yada yada yada. But anyway, let's get into this video here. So, after looking, basically what I did was I watched some Season of Discovery review videos that have recently come out. I looked at the poll. I listened to Guzu talk about it. I listened to Zaryu talk about it. I've been, thinking about Season of Discovery and Classic Plus for quite some time. It's one of the things I do enjoy talking about. And I just want to go over it from my perspective. We're going to start off with, just do an overview here. We're going to start off with the real system, why it is fucking amazing, but it desperately needs some adjustments compared to what we saw in Season of Discovery. The new raids and the new content. I can literally read verbatim what's right here. From the videos I have been watching, polls and the like, no one seems to dislike the new dungeons, raids, raid challenge system, new quests, new zones, open world content, and PvP battlegrounds. Nobody, as near as I can tell, has a problem with this shit whatsoever. Let's zoom in a bit here. Has a problem with this or any of that whatsoever. Even the polls came back extremely positive with a yes, please, to all of that. Every time I've heard any bitching about any of the additional content whatsoever added to Classic World of Warcraft, it's always in the context of, I can just read this here really fast. The biggest thing they hated about SOD, if they bitched about any of the above at all, was due to class balance, raid difficulty, game pacing, meaning Classic World of Warcraft has a very slow thinking man's game pace. And the only classes that have a very fast-paced game pace where you have to, push a lot of buttons and be very reactive and yada, yada, yada are kind of specific to their class, if that makes any sense. It's not, and Season of Discovery kind of made an issue where it was like every class was forced to play at a higher pacing. And if you didn't like that because you were a Classic WoW player, there wasn't really any escape from that. So the game pacing of just how quickly you have to push your buttons, how on the ball you have to be to run away from game mechanics, not a lot of downtime or breathe time with the game mechanics. The pacing was a lot faster. So people would complain about that. Too many abilities. These two things go together. Having too many buttons to press affects game pacing. Too complicated. That was another thing that people complained a lot about, but we'll get to that in a second. Not complicated enough. That's the other thing people would bitch about, and stuff like that. So how do we fix this, right? And this is one of the reasons I haven't made this video for a long time, is I've been thinking a lot about how to fix this too complicated / not complicated enough dilemma that appears to manifest. And we're going to be basically talking about that closer to the end of the video here. I'm going to get really fucking passionate talking about this too complicated thing when I start talking about PvP, because holy fuck, If I don't have I have personal beef in this and personal experience with this. Oh boy. This is one of the reasons why we're making this video, so I get to rant and rave when we start talking about the nonsense down here. But let's talk about the real system first, because it's by far the easiest to fix. All right. So I'm just going to start reading because I think I did a pretty good job writing it down. Most of the time I just take notes and then I'll just, talk about things. But this time around I wanted to write it out in full. All right, cool. Reels were like the reels. Okay, number one, the reel system in TBC was great, but it had some issues. If we can fix those issues, everyone will agree that the reel system is amazing. I've heard people talk about how they hate the reel system and reasons for that. I've heard people talk about how they love the reel systems and reasons for that. What we want is to solve. I'm a hater. Okay, I hate the reel system, but I'm also aware that if you fix certain issues with the reel system, it's fucking amazing. Okay. All right, so we're trying to fix the problem some people have with the reel system. Reels were like a better version of TBC. This is what I heard said quite often on the positive side of things. Reels were like a better version of TBC badge system, but it made the need to be in the open world pointless. This is the problem I have with it, and a lot of people do. This was especially bad for PvPers and on PvP servers. On PvE servers, being in the open world is kind of pointless due to bots farming everything, right? Basically, the bots own PvE servers, and trying to go out there and farm resources to compete with them kind of sucks. The real system was absolutely amazing if you're used to this kind of economic reality on a PvE server, because it let you basically just not need to be in the open world. You could run dungeons. You could get all the mats and the resources you needed. The way it was executed in Season of Discovery combated the economic issues of bots being everywhere on PvE servers extremely efficiently. However, it ended up screwing over PvP servers because PvP servers have their own fucking way of dealing with the problems of bots in their economy. And it's objectively a better way of dealing with bots in the economy. So it basically tried to solve a problem that it tried to solve a problem on PvE servers that did not exist on PvP servers. And it was a extraordinarily less effective way of solving that it cucked over PvP servers, basically. I'll just keep reading. We'll get to the point. But on PvP servers, bots are kept much more in check due to players just killing them. Yeah, we literally just fucking kill them. It's like, yo, homie, I want to farm this resource in this area. Get the fuck out. If you're not a player, you can't stop me. If you're not a good PvPer, you can't stop me. If you're a fucking bot, I'm just going to murder you and not let you farm this area anymore. So farming open world equaled more valuable. It also equaled PvP, and it equaled a lot of fun for PvPers, okay? On PvP servers, we have our own way of dealing with bots, and that is that we just fucking kill them. Because we can. And because of that, they're basically not a problem. It forces us to go out in the open world to get those resources. It forces PvP in order to claim the rights to farm an area. And as PvPers, that's just fun for us. What the real system did to us in Season of Discovery is it forced us to the way you got resources was to run dungeons, not to PvP. And it made the open world completely dead for PvP. It was just full of fucking bots. And so we ended up just, as PvPers, we were just stuck running dungeons, and we couldn't find PvP in the open world. There was no arena system. It was just painful. I mean, it's like cutting. It felt like cutting your nose off to spite your face, or to try to solve a problem that didn't exist. And after thinking about it, I was like, okay, the real system solves a problem that exists on PvE servers with bots, but it doesn't with the PvP server. So anyways, let's think about solutions here. All right, so number one, have real system in-game as a catch-up mechanic. This was something everyone agrees is amazing with for alts and new players. Have it serve as a pity system for bad RNG and a viable way to farm gold in dungeons. So if you do not want to engage with the hostile PvP open world or farming resources in the world is not your jam, you would rather run dungeons and get all the gold you need from just running dungeons, having the real system being beneficial for that appears to be perfectly fine. This could be questionable because, you know, botting could take over the dungeons and greatly inflate the gold economy. As an economist, I'm going to tell you that's not going to be a problem at all because of the second thing on the list here. It's a problem if you don't look at the second option down here. Let me take a drink of water. Okay, 2. And you're going to do this for both PvP servers and PvE servers, all right? Have areas in the open world where needed resources can be farmed in multiple concentrated areas. So we mean not spread out over an entire zone, not confined to a single fucking area, but have multiple areas in the open world, concentrated areas where you can kill mobs or farm resources, okay? And the act of looting or killing the mobs in this area flags you for PvP, even on PvP servers, okay? This gives a reason for players not only to be in the open world, engage in PvP, if that's your thing, but what it really does is it prevents bots from devaluing said resource due to players killing them because they're flagged for PvP. The two best examples I can give you of this in Classic World of Warcraft and where the idea really comes to me as a PvPer in Classic WoW is Essence of Water and Essence of Air. So, Essence of Air in Classic World of Warcraft, there's really only one place you can go in all of Classic WoW to farm Essence of Air, and that is Northern Silithus. There's a bunch of dust devils, dust elementals, air elementals in Northern Silithus in a very specific area where that's the only real fucking place you can go to farm to get Essence of Air. On PvP servers, you will almost never see bots there farming this resource because it is absolutely locked down by human PvPers. The bots cannot compete with the human PvPers. We will absolutely wreck their fucking face, identify them, and mass report them. So they don't even go anywhere near this farming area because we'll basically just beat the shit out of them. So every time you see an Essence of Air on the auction house, it's virtually guaranteed that that Essence of Air was farmed by a human player, and the price on the auction house of getting your hands on an Essence of Air is valued accordingly. So it's a great... what you want for your player base, economically speaking, is for a way for them to interact... is a way for them to plug themselves into the economy that the bots cannot get access to. Where, because whatever the bots are farming is going to be incredibly cheap on the auction house, which means that the player base doesn't really want to farm that resource and compete with the bots. It's not economically viable for us to compete with highly motivated slave labor, which is effectively what the bots are. However, if you do this, right, what happens is we'll just kill the bots, we'll farm them as the players, and suddenly the price of that item will be 2 or 3 times more valuable on the auction house, especially since because there's no way for the bots to get it, and there's no way for the humans to get it unless they're good enough at PvP or coordinating a group of PvPers to go out and actually farm that area. Okay, so it gives the humans a way to plug themselves into the economy that the bots also cannot plug themselves in the economy, and it's a pretty foolproof system. However, the issue with Essence of Air is that it's only found in one fucking location, so it's pretty easy for like a mafias to form, and for the resource to be it's not easily PvP contested. Let's put it that way. Because there's only one place that you can farm Essence of Air. It's almost always farmed by the Horde, because the Horde tend to be just better PvPers and more motivated in general. It's very difficult for the Alliance to go out there and farm. You have to be like really good PvPers like me, or bring more bodies. This problem, however, is solved when we look at essence of water. There are 3 places that I can think of off the top of my head where you can farm essence of water in classic World of Warcraft. They're all open world. They're all highly concentrated areas. It's a much needed resource in classic WoW for a bunch of enchants. And it's found in northern Fellwood. I like the fact that it's spread out over multiple zones, is what I'm trying to say. It's found both in northern Fellwood, and it's found in 2 lake areas, separated but still kind of close to each other, in eastern Plaguelands. All right, and basically what this does, and you can also see this formula manifesting itself with the Scarab Lord killing the bugs quest grind, right? You have the 3 hives out in Silithus, the 3 separate concentrated areas where you can farm bugs, and you'll see like one area will be locked down by the Horde, and because one of the areas is locked down by the Horde, the Alliance just goes and locks down a different area, and then the third and final area is either locked down by one of those factions, or it's just like the free-for-all area, kind of a deal. So you want concentrated areas, and you want to spread them out. If I go down here, we can see what happens if we don't spread them out. I'll just read it. If the resource is an open world, if the resource is an open world only, meaning that you can't find the resource in the dungeons. If the resource exists in the dungeons, what'll happen is the bots gain access to that, and it ends up devaluing it on the market. Can't PvP the bots when they're in dungeons. So when I say it's only in the open world, I mean it's only in the fucking open world. If the resource is open world only, but spread out over a wide area, equals bots can farm it as players cannot keep guard over said resource using PvP effectively. So an example of this that I can very vividly remember is in Phase 1 of Classic WoW, before Dire Maul is out. Thorium veins, especially rich thorium veins that can give you arcane crystals, are only found in the open world. They do not exist in dungeons. Everybody fucking needs this resource one way or another. But they're spread out over entire zones and over very, very wide areas. Okay? And because of this, bots can easily farm that resource even on a PvP server. Because basically both the humans and the bots are basically just running around in circles doing brodies in zones. And I cannot... Us PvPers cannot lock down that area using PvP. We can't kill the bots to stop them from farming this resource, because the resource is spread out over too wide of an area. Then what happened was Dire Maul East came out, and Dire Maul jump runs are a thing. Basically, there's 2 or 3 rich thorium nodes that you can get pretty easy access to by running that dungeon even as a single player, which means bots can very easily go into that dungeon as a group of 2. They know where to jump here, jump there. Very easy for them to farm those rich thorium nodes. The moment that happens, and the moment Dire Maul East comes out, the price of thorium and arcane crystals basically crashes on the auction house. Thorium would be like 1 gold a bar, and an arcane crystal would be like 100 G for an arcane crystal. Actually, I take that back. It's like 50 gold for an arcane crystal, but gold is so hard to find at that point that it's the equivalent of like 100 G later on in the game. But then Dire Maul East comes out, and suddenly the arcane crystals are selling for 50 G, even though our inflation is happening all the time. The price basically gets hammered down to like 50 gold. That's the good thing about bots. Bots will farm resources for the player base, and they will keep the prices low. But what pisses players off is when there's no good way for us to plug ourselves into the economy without competing with the bots. So we're trying to find a way for bots to exist in the game to both make the prices cheaper, but at the same time, there are certain things that only players can really farm, and they're good ways for players to plug themselves into the economy with not having to compete with bots. I've played EVE Online for years. I studied economics in college. I'm a socio-political economic philosophy major. I can tell you that the bots are your friend if you can find a way to plug yourself into the economy where bots really don't have access to it. To say that that plays out on EVE Online in the most brutal sense would be difficult for me to express. So, for example, is another example of this, right? In EVE Online, when the servers basically reset, there's a shit ton of resources in high sec that if you log in onto the server, you will see a sight to behold, and that is like hundreds of mining ships and hauling vessels that are all bots. They will flower outside of the docking bays of space stations, going off in all directions to mine every single asteroid that is respawned. That's easy for them to gain access to. And within a matter of a couple hours, they will have picked clean all the resources in HiSec outside of missions, farming missions that the bots can get access to, and they'll basically all redock and go dormant, waiting for the server to reset. The net result is that tritium ore and a bunch of resources that can be mined safely in HiSec by the bots, the prices for that very necessary resource on the server is kept extremely low. However, there are resources that can only be mined in PvP zones, and you can still bot mine those resources, but behind those bots are human players, because, how do I put this? So, it's my job as a PvPer in EVE Online to basically whore myself out to other players. I get hired by other players as a PvPer to basically farm an area of space, while at the same time allowing another human player's bot farming to take place. And it's my job, along with a good 5 or 6 other mercenaries, to try to defend that PvP area of space so the bots can do their job. Am I making any fucking sense here? So it's not that botting doesn't exist in high sec, where or even low sec, where it's in high security, low security, where it's incredibly fucking dangerous for any fucking starship to be. It's just that they need human players, human PvPers to guard them, or they're going to get rickrolled, is what I'm trying to say here. So at the end of the day, if us PvPers for whatever reason decide we don't like botting happening in high sec, low sec, we can very easily go and shut down that operation. At the end of the day, basically what it meant was the prices of the mineable resources in high sec were always much, much higher and much, much more valuable to mine, because behind it was always the threat of PvP. PvP was always there. In classic World of Warcraft, let's get 5 PvPers to defend a botting operation of 20 bots in high sec. That doesn't fucking exist in classic World of Warcraft. PvPers do not share. So you won't have scenarios like that playing out on a PvP server. But in all these cases, I just wanted to give you examples to go with this philosophy. And that is that the bots are technically your friends if you can find a way to plug them. If you can find a way that the human players can still plug themselves into the economy, into the resource gathering that the bots effectively do not have access to. And the real system did this in Season of Discovery, making PvEers very happy, but making the PvPers extremely unhappy because we already had a much better fucking system for dealing with bots and a way to plug ourselves into the economy that the real system basically shit on. And to be perfectly honest, I think this proposal that I'm proposing is just the superior method, both for PvE servers and for PvP servers. You could keep the real system as we saw it in Season of Discovery 1-to-1, and the PvEers might be completely happy with that, but you cannot have it like that on PvP servers. It will absolutely obliterate PvP. It'll make it so there's no point in being in the open world, and there won't be any way for us to plug ourselves into the economy, like leverage our PvP skills and capability to plug. It'll just make us miserable. It's just a really bad idea. So this proposal has to be done on PvP servers 100%. You can theoretically get away with it on not doing this on PvE servers, but I'm pretty sure even on the PvE servers, the players will be perfectly fine with this. Yeah. Anyways, they'll bitch about it, but it's for their best. They'll be like, I wish I could. They'll say stupid shit like, I wish there was a way I could farm this resource in the open world and not get flagged, not get PvP flagged. And anybody with a brain will tell them that if that's the way that it works, you won't be able to farm this resource either because it'll just be bot controlled, right? So it's kind of like we can't give them what they want the way that they want it because they're stupid to realize it won't work. And that's going to be kind of a theme going on into the new raid stuff. Okay, so real system, done and dusted. Some people loved it. Some people hated it. I'm one of the haters, and I think if we make these slight changes to the system, I think the system just has kind of nothing but positives, if that makes any sense. So I would love to see the real system in Classic Plus, but I would 100% want to see open world, like literally open world only resources that are concentrated in multiple areas, and you get flagged for PvP. When you try to mine them. That's if you're on a PvE server. But PvP server, the flag for PvP will just take care of itself. Problem solved, done and dusted. All right, moving on. We still recording? Yeah, 30 minutes. 30 minutes on one subject. Typical Pally time video. Let me take a drink of water here. All right. New raids and dungeons equals great. So like I talked about before, I haven't seen anybody complain whatsoever about new content in Classic World of Warcraft. No complaints there whatsoever. Any and every time I saw a complaint, it had to do with them not liking the game pacing, too many abilities. Too many abilities will increase complexity. Too complex. Improved game pacing also increases complexity. Some people would also bitch about it not being complex enough, which, is quite the quandary. What the hell is going on there exactly? How can we fix it? And then, of course, class balance. Am I doing okay here? I'm going to pause. I think I need to blow my nose and take another drink of water and cough. So I'm just pause really fast here. Yeah, we're better. I usually don't like to pause the video when I'm doing stuff like that. Got the Google thing. We might be looking at that here in a second. Yeah. Where are we? We are in an MS Paint. I usually don't like to pause the video when I do stuff like that. I'll pause to blow my nose, but not to like cough and spit after I've been talking for a long time. A lot of people hate it, but every time I pause the video, there's like I feel there's like a 10% chance that I'll accidentally like lose the video. Or forget, like so I'll just lose like my half an hour of recording, which is, it pisses me off. I've done that enough that I just give up and just, hawk tua all over the place. Drink of water. Okay. Where the hell was I? What the hell are we talking about? Class balance, right? Class balance is easy enough to deal with. Raid difficulty, all that stuff. How do I think I'm just going to start reading because there are multiple ways for me to go about explaining this and all roads lead to Rome. So whatever. Great enemy of game design. All All right, so let's talk about the great enemy of game design here. Yeah, I'm just going to start reading. One of the greatest enemies in game development is pressure to make the game more complicated. Let me say that again for all you retarded game devs in the back. One of the greatest enemies to game design and development, I use the word development very intentionally here, is pressure to make the game more complicated. The pressure comes from two sources and is best fought against from the top down. I've thought a lot about how to fix this fucking problem here. I'm convinced that it has to be solved from the top down, meeting management level resistance to over complexity at the surface level. We'll get into that in a second. Example of issue. Underlings want to impress their higher-ups, meaning if you have people working underneath you and you're the boss at the company, or they want to impress their higher-ups, and since you cannot impress your boss with simplicity, there is an incentive structure to ++ complexity and game design flowing from the bottom up. Okay? Design have for the game secret sauce. Okay. Now, I forgot to write it here, but we also didn't have room. So that's the two sources. Remember I said this pressure comes from two sources. The first source is coming from bottom and up at the company level. People below want to impress their their higher ups, their bosses. You can't impress them with complexity, or my bad, you can't impress them with simplicity. So all the proposals are usually coming from the bottom up, are usually increasing the complexity of abilities and whatnot and game design at the company. Let me drink of water. All right, that is a systemic issue of how a company is run. And when I say systemic issue, I mean it is an issue caused by the nature of the system we are using at a company to do what it is that we do. The bottom, the system itself is what is causing this problem in conjunction with human incentive and incentive structures. That's me getting my socio-political whatnot on. The one that I don't have written down here is the other one, and that is that us game designers, and I'm gonna put myself in there. I am learning, Roblox, Lua U, and I'm I'm hell bent on making my game for Roblox and blah 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 blah. Us game designers tend to be one of two things. We either on the higher end of the IQ spectrum, which means that simplicity to us is not as fun or interesting as complexity to us, and these two things compound, they're not mutually exclusive, or we are so familiar, ideally, with the game that we are making that simplicity no longer perks our interest. We can no longer find fun in the simplicity of like World of Warcraft, if that makes any sense. So us as the game designers trying to chase what is fun will make the mistake of doing what is fun for us, even though which is to increase the complexity because we've been playing the game for like 20 fucking years. Okay? So we're either increasing complexity in our game because we're high IQ and we prefer complexity, or we're increasing it because we're bored with the game being so simple. We played it so much that we find the fun in complexity. Okay? Normal human beings that hate this shit. They hate complexity in their game. This is the answer to the question of too complicated, not complicated enough. I'm going to attempt to answer this question as best as I can using IQ terminology, because I think this is the best way to think about it, okay? So down here, you'll see that I have me blathering away about normies. I'm just going to keep reading, okay? By far the best game design one can have for their game, the secret sauce, the magic formula, this is near as I can tell as an aspiring game designer, is 1, simple and easy on the surface, 2, complexity packed underneath. Let me say that again. Simple and easy on the surface, complexity, all the complexity of the game, it's there, but it is hidden underneath. Okay? Classic World of Warcraft adheres to this formula beautifully. Okay? All the classes in the game are dirt fucking simple on the surface. You don't need to know fuck all about how the abilities work, like, that it's 20 skill point, 20 agility for 1% crit, what the proc on hit of this thing or that thing is. You don't really need to know fuck all about your class. The abilities, you just kind of need to know the abilities and how best to use them, right? Very, very simple on the surface, but if you want to mine more efficiency out of your class and be a better player, the moment you start looking under the surface, you'll begin to notice that World of Warcraft is noticeably more complex under the surface than it is on the surface. This is why you can hand this game, World of Warcraft, over to a child, and he will get pretty good at playing World of Warcraft, despite not knowing fuck all about how things work underneath the surface. This is good game design. Okay. Another great example is Diablo 2. Diablo 2 is reasonably simple on the surface. You don't need to know fuck all about Deadly Strike. You don't need to know how Open Wounds works. You don't need to know about Crushing Blow. You don't need to know about how the defense rating or how block value works in the game. You just hover, or how your attack rating works. You just literally, you can go to your character screen and hover over your defense rating, and it will tell you that, the last mob that you hovered your mouse over, you have a 75% chance to hit them with your weapon. When you put skills into the dexterity stat or attack rating, you can watch that number go up. When you take them out, you can watch that number go down. Same thing happens with your defense rating. You can just hover over your defense. You don't need to know the math. You don't need to know how it works. You can just hover over it, and it'll be like, yeah, you've got like a 50% chance to be hit by this mob and a 75% chance to block. It doesn't tell you that first it's going to check to see if you get hit, and only after it's gotten through that 50% chance for you to be hit, will the block chance kick in, right? It doesn't tell you fuck all about fuck all. But it doesn't mean that the complexity isn't there for you to look for it. What it means is that the game is simple enough on the surface that you can play it and understand what's going on without needing to turn your goddamn brain on and look deeper at anything. But if you want to, it's fucking there for you to find. Other games that do this is like StarCraft 1 does this in spades. Incredibly easy to learn to play the game, incredibly difficult to master, blah, 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 blah. By far, my favorite example of this, the secret sauce for game design, is Pokemon Sapphire and Emerald. I've played Pokemon since it first came out, and I was like 13 fucking years old in like middle school, or 12 or 13 in fucking middle school. I remember the first time Pokemon on a shitty-ass colorless Game Boy was handed to me, all right? I've adored Pokemon for years. I played Pokemon for probably a goddamn decade, a whole fucking decade, before I discovered the complexity underneath Pokemon and that I had been playing it wrong the entire fucking time. And this basically made me fall in love with the game all over again, because now I'm older, now I'm smarter, now I know more, and I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean that killing certain Pokemon or defeating certain Pokemon with my Pokemon literally increases the targeted stats of my Pokemon? Like, I had an idea that if I breed Pokemon, or if I catch them in the wild, they're going to have different stats, right? I had an idea of EVs, but I think it's EPs, effort points, like evolution value and then effort points. What I'm basically trying to describe here, if you have no fucking idea what I'm talking about, is this. have you ever leveled your Pokemon and you had like a level 50 Pokemon and you found yourself needing to kill like five no not five like 100 lower level Pokemon just because you're trying to get through a goddamn area? So you basically have your level 50 Pokemon, you're trying to walk through an area. You just have to it's the same and you just have to kill like 100 of them in order to get from A to B. And then you finally level up that Pokemon, and for some fucking reason, he gets +2 in all stats, except for HP is a fucking +12 when you level this asshole up. That's effort points. Basically, that mob that you were, that Pokemon that you were fighting is giving you, like, +2, +4 effort points every time you kill one of them to your HP stat. And... And for every 3 effort points that you get, you gain +1 to that stat. You can only gain so many effort points on any given Pokemon, though. So if you're very specific about how you train your Pokemon, what you fight and what don't fight, you can gain, like, I forget how much it is, but I think it's like +60 stats, however the fuck you want them on your Pokemon. Okay? I played Pokemon for years, not having any fucking clue that mechanic existed. I thought I was really good at Pokemon, and then when I started reading Team Rocket Elite Team Rocket Elite online and learning about this shit, I was like, what the fuck? So simple on the surface, complexity packed / hidden underneath. Now, the reason why this works, I'm going to keep reading, has to do with the varying IQ levels of your player base and what they like and don't like, okay? So I'm just going to keep reading here. Complexity in games equals good, but not at the surface level, as only smart people, aka IQ 130 plus, really enjoy their brains being tested like that. I'm being serious. I'm going to give proof to this in a second. Normies, aka dumb people, aka 120 or lower IQ people, aka the vast majority of fucking human beings on planet Earth that you want playing your goddamn game, that if you fail to cater to, you objectively have failed to make a good game. Okay, I need to stress this because I'm talking trash to them, but at the same time, they're mission critical to make happy, right? I'm calling them normies. I'm calling them dumb. I'm calling them low IQ, but they're the vast majority of human beings, right? So if we're not smart enough to realize how valuable it is to get these motherfuckers on side, as game developers, as game designers, we done fucked up, right? But we also need to remember that these people are fucking morons. I have personal experience and investment in this because I've spent literally years trying to get probably the most moronic player base in classic World of Warcraft, which are paladin players, fascinatingly, to play and PvP with their class better, and I can't do it. So I've learned a lot of lessons about just how fucking retarded human beings actually are, and how difficult it is to get them to turn their goddamn brains on. But we'll get there. Okay. Anyways, normies, aka dumb people, aka 120 IQ or less people, aka the like 80% of human beings hate complexity. They hate needing to turn their brain on. They hate needing to think. Complexity forces them to think, which they are not good at. They're not good at thinking. And that makes them feel dumb, and it makes them feel like they're bad at the game, okay? So it starts having negative psychological reinforcers on them, and it makes them not want to play their game. And we can start seeing them trying to blame just about everything under the sun, other than the fact that they're dumb, they suck, and or they may be egotistical and stubborn, okay? What's my degreed background? Socio-economic political philosopher. All right. Psychology is critical in there, and I'll tell you right now that the vast majority of human beings, as near as I can tell, are going to be psychologically incompatible with too much complexity on the surface level of your game, because it makes them feel dumb. It hurts their ego. You're asking them to turn on their brain. They don't want to turn on their fucking brain, blah, 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 blah. So if we scroll back up here and we read things like the complaints that we're seeing out of the community for Season of Discovery. Nobody complained about new content, but when they did complain, they started bitching about things like class balance. Okay, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Raid difficulty falls into this category. Let's start doing some Control Z's here. Raid difficulty falls in this category because the more difficult you're making the raid, the more you're asking people to turn their goddamn brains on, which means if they're not good at turning their brains on, which is 80% of your player base, they're gonna look like shit at the game. They're gonna be shit at the game, and that's gonna hurt their pride and ego at the game, and they're not gonna want to play your game. Game pacing, the more game pacing you're requiring from your player base, you're asking them to turn their brain on, or to, be intelligent about how they push their abilities. Same fucking problem, same negative psychological spiral for normies starts taking place. Too many abilities, same fucking thing starts to manifest. Too complicated is what they say. The game's too complicated, blah, 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 blah. This is them all saying the same fucking thing to you. When they say raids are too difficult, they're complaining about complexity. When they're saying about game pacing, they're complaining about complexity. When they're saying too many abilities, they're complaining about complexity. And then we get to the motherfuckers that complain that the game is not complicated enough. Okay? A percentage of your player base will start bitching that the game is not complicated enough. Well, when I go look into it, these fuckers have either been playing the game for like over a decade, right? So of course they want more complexity in the game. They're bored with what they've been given, or they're high IQ motherfuckers, and they want to be able to turn their brain on. They're finding the simplicity of classic World of Warcraft to be insufficient for them. In classic WoW, I personally hate raiding. I hate raiding because I find it, for my IQ level, I find raiding to be boring as fucking sin. Which is why I gravitate towards PvP, because PvP, if you want complexity in a World of Warcraft, go learn fucking PvP. There's no comparison between the complexity of Classic WoW's PvP and how easy raiding is, or PvE is, by comparison, right? So I've found a workaround by just, focusing mainly on PvP and not PvE. But for normies, it's kind of the opposite. They prefer PvE rather than PvP because PvP is too complicated for them, and PvP requires them to turn their brain on, class knowledge, blah, 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 blah. PvP also has a very violent and very pride and ego crushing feedback loop to you. And what I mean by this is that in classic, and this is good game design, we're going to talk about this in a second. It is good game design for your bad players to be unable to detect that they are in fact shit players. Okay? Classic World of Warcraft raiding does this beautifully. Classic World of Warcraft raiding is so fucking easy that you can be a shit raider and think you're really good at classic WoW raiding because of how easy the raids are, right? The same thing happens kind of in classic World of Warcraft PvP, where you can be really bad at PvP, but you can still get your Grand Marshal's gear. You can still think you're amazing at PvP because of how the vast majority of PvP battlegrounds are set up. There's no elo system in the battlegrounds. There's no, a lot of battlegrounds, you can just do PvE objectives or just heal and support your teammates, and you can be a really good PvPer. There's no feedback structure in classic World of Warcraft outside of dueling a bunch of people that is going to tell you just how good or bad you are at PvP, okay? When we move into TBC, the arena system comes out. All the PvPers are now funneled through the arena PvP system. And the arena PvP system, in order to get your PvP gear in TBC, you have to be good at the arena PvP system. The arena PvP system is on an ELO structure, right? Which means that you have to be good at PvP in order to fight people who are better at PvP, in order to fight better people who are even better at PvP, in order to get your fucking gear. The arena system, in order to get your PvP gear, is despised by normies because it, especially going from Classic World of Warcraft into TBC, because TBC allows them to think they're good at PvP when they're not, and still get their gear, and still complete the game, but the moment they are funneled into the TBC Arena PvP system, they become painfully aware of how bad at PvP they really are, because it's no longer hidden from them, right? They're going to see their, 1,600, 1,500 ELO ranking or less, and they're going to be like, what's going to happen is their egos aren't going to really be able to take it, and so the next thing they know, they're coming out with all kinds of excuses, right? They start bitching about a class balance. They start bitching about this or that, or how broken these abilities are. They start bitching about things that aren't a problem to protect their egos from the actual reality of the situation, which is they're just bad at PvP. Okay? And as game designers, it's important for us to realize what exactly is happening here, because if we don't, we might actually go out and try to fix all the things that these guys are bitching about, and that's just the wrong problem. The actual problem is that how bad they are at the game is no longer being hidden from them. And all these things fall into the exact same category in the grand scheme of things, right? Raid difficulty causes how bad they are at the game to no longer be hidden for them, causes them to, go into this feedback loop. I'm just going to call it a feedback loop, okay? Where they're going to make excuses, and they're going to talk about how they want the raids to be easier. Game pacing, exact same thing. Too many abilities, exact same thing. Too complicated, exact same thing. But then you have guys who have played the game so long, or they have high IQs, and they want the complexity in the game. That's where they're gonna find this their fun. Adhering to this simple magical formula of simple and easy on the surface, complexity packed underneath, and ends up satisfying both these types of players at the same time. Because the game is, let's look at Classic World of Warcraft, right? The raids are easy enough to beat that you can both suck at the game and not need to know fuck all about fuck all in order to beat the raids in Classic World of Warcraft. This allows most of the player base to feel like they are in fact good raiders because the bosses are actually dying. But for anyone who wants to get really good at raiding, who wants to actually flex on other motherfuckers, or just be better at the game in general, there's enough complexity hidden under the surface that they can mine to be objectively superior to everybody else. So you get this weird thing where nobody's egos are really hurt. There's complexity there if you want the game to be complicated, but the game can also be really simple. If you want it to be simple, you end up in this weird situation where like everybody is happy, right? So I personally end up in this weird situation that I find laughable, where it's like, I'm not a bad raider, but I'm not a good raider either. All I care about when it comes to raiding is, are the bosses dying? If they're dying, I don't give a fuck about how well I'm performing, how well everybody else is performing. I don't give a shit. Are the bosses dying and are we getting the loot is all I give a fuck about. I will have people that will look up my raid logs and try to tell me that I'm not a good WoW player because my raid logs are shit. All right? To which I find baffling, because... No. What they'll do specifically is they'll try to tell me that I suck at PvP because my raid logs are bad. And I'm like, fight me then. and nobody ever fights me. Like, I accept all challengers and duels. No one's ever challenged me into a duel. They'll talk shit, but they won't actually accept a fight, which I find hilarious. But again, what I'm trying to explain with this analogy is that the people who get really good at raiding try to talk shit to the people who are bad at raiding for their parses, but the people who are bad at raiding don't give a shit because the bosses are dying and they're getting the loot. The bad players are able to find solace from such criticisms and from the bad parsing that they might be having, because the bosses are dying and they're getting loot. So in a weird way, you're making both players happy. The exact same thing I'm struggling to explain this, my bad. The exact same thing happens when you look at classic World of Warcraft PvP system. You can be absolutely terrible at PvP, and all you have to do is basically queue Alterac Valley over and over and over and over again, and you will eventually get your PvP gear, and you can convince yourself that you are in fact good at PvP, because the vast majority of PvPers you're fighting are also shit at PvP and are normies like you. So from your perspective, you win like 70% of your fights. You must be a PvP god. Whereas if you actually were a PvP god, you'd almost never lose any 1v1 ever, and you would realize just how bad the player base actually is at PvP. The fact that the game system itself, because both hides the fact that the vast majority of players are bad at something, okay? And or they can find very easy solace in the fact that they're getting the loot, they're winning, even if it's not hidden from them, which is what happens with the raiding and the parsing. The raids are easy, we're getting the loot, we're downing the bosses. Why the fuck should I care that my parse is like, 60%, 70% or some shit like that? They will think that the people who care about that stuff are stupid. The people who care about that stuff get to pat themselves in the back and flatter themselves with how much better they are than the vast majority of the player base. The exact same thing happens with the PvP system and how you get the gear in classic World of Warcraft. The vast majority of normies only ever fight normies, so it's really hidden from them just how bad at PvP they are. Even if they do find out that they're actually terrible at PvP, they're getting the gear anyways, so what the fuck do they care? And then, elite PvPers like me can flex on all the normies and tell how good they are. That's not how I like to do it, but I've run into a bunch of PvPers that for some reason have a huge ego investment in how good they are at PvP, and then I start beating the shit out of them, and then for some reason they get really mad. But then if you look at TBC, the arena system in TBC strips that illusion away from them, and it demands that the PvP system basically gets more complicated. It demands more. Let's go back up here again. Right. The PvP system, the reward system, suddenly demands that you be good at the game, and subsequently it's not hiding the fact that you're bad at the game, and this is bad. Okay, that is to be avoided. But again, if you keep things simple and easy on the surface, and the complexity of the game packed underneath, there's probably one more element that needs to be factored in here, but I'm struggling to explain it, where it's like, you want the reward system as well to hide the fact that people are bad at the game, or to not care about they're bad at the game. Season of Discovery did this really well. Again, I'm really struggling to explain this here. Season of Discovery did this really well with their different like heat systems, or their different challenge modes, I think was the terminology that they called them, where there was a normal mode, and then like a difficult mode, and then like an elite mode. And you could get the same gear on the normal mode that you can get on the veteran mode. I think I literally proposed this in one of my videos a while back. It was the same quality of gear. It's just that there would be more gear drops if you did it on the harder difficulty, right? And then the elite gear drops were just cosmetic rewards. And that's just perfect game design, right? That is perfect game design because you're rewarding people for their skill, but you're not punishing people who are unskilled. And you're also rewarding people with the power to flex on people, but at the same time, you're not giving them a power. It's perfect. I think I did this in a previous video. When I saw them implementing that in Season of Discovery, my hats was off to them. And from what I've seen from feedback, everyone kind of enjoyed that version of the system. So I'm just hammering home about the PvP side of things because it works the same way with PvP. We want our PvPers to get easy access to good PvP gear. We do not want to bottleneck, gatekeep. We do not want to gatekeep the best PvP gear in the game behind a skill requirement. Okay? We can gatekeep the best looking PvP gear in the game behind a skill requirement, but don't gatekeep it from an actual skill requirement. You will piss off the vast majority of normies, especially if you're catering to this simple on the surface, complexity packed underneath. What happens to the normies is that if you gatekeep in this manner, you basically force the normies to look into getting good at the game in order to, you know, get the best PvP gear, get the best PvE gear. And then they immediately start having issues with the feedback loop down here, right? They begin to learn that, oh shit, the game is more complicated than I actually thought it was. They're required to turn their brain on, which they're not good at, so it makes them feel dumb. It starts hurting their egos and their pride, and it's just bad. Okay, it's just bad. And again, when they start bitching at you, they're not going to be as succinct about what the issue is as I am. On the subject, they're going to start bitching about other things. But their bitching about the other things is basically potentially symptomatic of what is actually going on under the surface. Okay, cool. Almost done with this video, I promise. Oh, an hour and 2 minutes. So we're doing good. Pally time video under an hour and 30 minutes of this nature. We're doing good. We're doing good. Okay. I'm taking a drink of water here. What do I want to look up over here? Game dev. Okay. So I had a very interesting, surreal experience for me in Season of Discovery. And that is, I made this video here. Game deving SOD PvP proper classic WoW game design. What happened in SOD for me is that Blizzard was fucking up the PvP system for classic World of Warcraft so badly that I started making multiple videos on the subject and about how classic WoW PvP is supposed to work. That it adheres to very specific ratios. So, like, you know, spell damage is like 1-to-1 mana efficiency ratio. Healing is 1-to-2 mana efficiency ratio. We got down here, healing spell ratios are 20 to 30% higher than spell damage ratios. The reason why that is important is that it means that if I'm putting on spell power gear and they're putting on spell power gear, my heals are always going to outpace their damaging spells. I don't have to put on plus healing gear in order to outpace their damaging spells. Other things like base healing of spells 50% higher, blah, 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 right? Then I started developing my theory of burst meta, chip burst meta, counter meta. I did a whole video on that. Maybe I can search for this. We don't want that really quick. Maybe if I click the back button here, we can search it really quick. Classic WoW PvP meta. Let's see what comes up. That's a tier list, dumbass. Stat, leveling, gear guide, one-handed, yada, yada, yada. My naming convention is sometimes questionable. God tier paladin. Okay, we're not fighting anything. Was it game dev SOD? SOD PvP dev. Let's try that. See what happens. Game deving, SOD, PvEP gearing? Okay. SOD, period of pally time changes his mind. Ah, alright, whatever. Can't find it. Let's go. PvP game design? Yes. Proper paladin game design. I'm willing to bet, based upon these search results. What the fuck is this?
Alright.
No, shut up. I'm willing to bet, based on these search results, that if I go to the video I just showed and start clicking around, fuck. So we got to go back. All right, whatever. Let's find the one we need. So I'm willing to bet that if I just click around here, we might see that in the future. Fuck. Where's that video? That's so annoying. Press play. And now we press pause. Yeah, so I can't find it. How annoying. I guess I'll maybe put a link in the description. I'll find it after this. It's kind of stupid. We can talk about it here in a second. Right, I want to talk about my surreal PvP experience that I had in Season of Discovery. So I bitched about how they were... Not only did I complain about how they were not, in Season of Discovery, how they were not healing or adhering to the right ratios and right mechanics. Would you fuck off? What the hell happened? Okay, there we go. The right ratios and the right mechanics and why it's important to keep to these ratios and yada, yada, yada. I talked about how things like, the burst meta, Classic WoW World of Warcraft operates on a... Fuck off. Operates on a burst meta. And then when we go into TBC, it becomes a chip burst meta. And then when we go into later expansions of Classic World of Warcraft, it transforms into a CD meta, and how the relationships were. Anyways, I got to experience the surreal... That's bad English. I had the surreal experience that when level 60, whatever phase that was, in Season of Discovery came out, I swear to God, somebody watched my video and they adhered to it almost religiously when level 60 came out. Now, every video that I've ever watched about people's experience PvPing in Season of Discovery, they all say that it was absolutely terrible PvP in Season of Discovery. However, they usually cite that Season of Discovery PvP was at its best, specifically during that phase that someone watched my video and basically said bet and did exactly what the fuck I was suggesting that they do. However, it was also terrible. My proposal, what I'm trying to say here is my proposal did not survive contact with the enemy for a very specific reason, and I've been thinking a lot about how to fix this. Okay, so I'm just going to start reading here. PvP game design examples of complexity good versus bad. Now, since this is close to me, I'll have a lot to say about this. What I learned... let's talk about the experience I had, and then we can go into detail about what I learned. So, what happened with Season of Discovery, level 60 PvP, was that if people built their classes more durable and built them, quote-unquote, better, like literally objectively better, what would happen would be they could survive the incoming enemy bursts, which is what happens in Classic World of Warcraft. If you don't build your class to hit certain breakpoints, to hit certain durability requirements, you will think Classic WoW PvP sucks a cock because you will be getting blown up left, right, and center in what is essentially a very burst-heavy PvP meta. But the moment you start hitting certain durability requirements, that's when PvP in Classic World of Warcraft really blooms in its complexity and its beauty. We've been playing Classic World of Warcraft so long that the player base has kind of figured out that this is what they need to do. It didn't used to be like that. What really caused the player base to be like, holy shit, is this how I was supposed to be PvPing this whole time? Was when the launch of the relaunch of Classic World of Warcraft happened back in 2016, and Asmongold and everybody else started hosting PvP tournaments. People basically got to see at the highest level of PvP, people were gearing noticeably more durable and, you know, taking bursts to the face and just healing through it and keep on trucking. I think it opened a lot of normies' minds to the fact that durability is king in Classic World of Warcraft, okay? What happened in Season of Discovery, however, was that everyone refused to gear more, all the normies refused to gear more durable. They instead geared to be a glass cannon, fought other players who were also geared to be glass cannons, blew the shit out of each other in that meta, obviously, and then started complaining to the devs that PvP was too bursty. Okay? Let me just start reading. I have a lot to say. I'm on the okay. So, what I learned from all of this was the following. If I think this is correct. If you give players a PvP gearing system where plus defense is greater than plus offense, but that plus defense durability is complicated to understand. Now, this is something I'm pretty sure I can definitively say is true that I've learned from my years of making PvP guides on YouTube and trying to convince these fucking retards that they should be gearing more defensively and not offensively and just failing. I'll just keep reading. If you give players a PvP gearing system where plus defense is greater than plus offense, but that plus defense is complicated to understand, but the plus offense is easy for these fucking normies to understand, the end result will be a bunch of idiots running around in glass cannon builds, blowing each other up, complaining about how the PvP meta is so bursty and they don't like it. They will also talk about how someone like me is retarded for trying to convince them that plus defense is better than plus offense, given the gaming meta. Okay? Now, the reason why this is happening goes right back to what the fuck is going on over here, right? I'm basically asking them to turn their fucking brains on in order to understand why plus defense is better than plus offense. And the act of them, they either can't do that, or the act of them doing that hurts their pride and their ego because they think they're smart and they know PvP and they know about the game. So trying to listen to someone who thinks, in their perspective, thinks they're smarter than them and, you know, blah, 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 blah. Or they learn that they're actually dumb and the game is more complicated than they think it is. It makes them feel dumb and, you know, blah, 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 blah. We get whatever the fuck is going on over here starts activating. However, and this gives me hope that we can, in fact, find a solution for this problem. This gives me hope. I want you to listen to me. This gives me hope. I am hopeful because I have also experienced what happens when you make it easy for them to understand. All right, let me read number 2 down here. If you, however, compared to the above, if you give the players a PvP resilience system as a stat and it's kind of painfully obvious that it's good, so say a minus 20% to minus 30% damage taken from all players, not only is it easy for normies to understand, but I have this is my personal experience, I have a hell of a hard time trying to convince PvPers not to take this stat. Okay? We see this happening in Classic World of Warcraft, and I've also seen this happening in, like, Warlords of Draenor. Okay? I'm going to give you an example of all this to really hammer this home. Let me take a drink of water here. My passion on this subject dries out my throat. Okay, so in Classic World of Warcraft, and this is what happened in Season of Discovery, and this happens in Classic World of Warcraft. It is a PvP meta where defense is greater than offense until you hit certain breakpoints. And once you hit those breakpoints of survivability, offense becomes better. Now, notice how complicated what I'm saying is already. This is the takeaway. I'm going to explain to you what it looks like in classic World of Warcraft versus if we just had a PvP resilient system like we do in TBC. And then I'm going to explain its effect on normies. Okay? The difference in acceptance between normies. As I'm explaining it in classic World of Warcraft, I want you to realize how complicated what I'm trying to explain is to an average human being, and try to anticipate at what point they turn their fucking brain off and they assume that someone like me doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about, that the game is in fact very bursty and it's all the game devs' faults for having such a bursty PvP system. Okay? Alright, so there are HP breakpoints or durability requirements that you need to get to in order to survive enemies bursting on you in classic World of Warcraft. Once you've done this, then only then is offense worth its weight in gold in classic World of Warcraft. This is in fact really good game design. This is where you want to be in your game design, because if it wasn't that way, if it somehow wasn't that way, that defenses were investing in defense was to a point was not better than offense, then that's when PvP is truly imbalanced and it actually really does suck. Okay. That's when the bursty meta really is there and there's no way around it and you actually have a right to complain to the devs. But first you need to actually go investigate if there is a fucking way for you to gear your class so that it is not, so that you're not trapped in bursty meta hell before you actually go bitch to the devs. Now, the way you achieve this in classic World of Warcraft is through a positive feedback loop. I know it's going to get complicated, but bear with me here. Is through a positive feedback loop through a number of stats. Okay? Those stats in question are usually something like increases to your armor, increases to your mitigation, so like dodge, block, parry, just putting on more HP. There's a positive synergy between, increasing your armor and increasing your PvP, your hit points. Resistances are also a factor here. So just increasing your resistances or just increasing your stamina is not as good as increasing both of those things. Hopefully you're smart enough to understand the positive feedback loop. I imagine all the dumb people are gone at this point. But then there's other things to consider, such as plus healing on your character. Because, if I go from a 30% physical damage reduction to a 50% physical damage reduction, adding plus healing gear on top of that is going to make it even more effective, right? So there's a positive feedback loop between all these stats, between your armor, your resistances, increasing your HP, and increasing your plus healing. Trying to explain how that works to a normal human being below 120 IQ is impossible. Literally impossible. I have to show them the effects in order for them to even want to listen to what the fuck I'm saying, which is what I think the PvP tournaments did back in 2016. I literally cannot explain to them how powerful that positive feedback loop is. I can barely explain to them hit certain HP breakpoints and the shaman won't have a 50% chance to blow you the fuck up in any given burst they send your way. I can barely manage that with these motherfuckers. Let alone trying to explain to them how synergetic feedback loop from 5 stats, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Conversely, and this gives me hope for the future, paradoxically, fascinatingly, if a PvP resilience stat exists in the game that they can very clearly hover over on their character screen and see that they have a minus 25% damage reduction. You okay? One of the dogs is coughing. A minus 25% damage reduction from player damage. I can't convince them not to take that thing. So It's like it's too complicated for them to understand how to get PvP resilience essentially in classic World of Warcraft. But if we give them a stat that's very simple and easy for them to understand, I can't convince them not to take it. Now, you might ask yourself, why the fuck would you ever try to convince a PvPer not to take PvP resilience? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing in like my next TBC video, which I'm going to make tomorrow because this one's already long as hell, but I've already thought about it. As a paladin, okay, well, let's just go over there really fast. Fuck it. Okay. And I've had to do this in like during like Warlords of Draenor, and I made like Wrath of the Lich King videos trying to tell people that they can sacrifice their PvP resilience as a paladin. It's a devalued stat on a paladin for a variety of reasons. So this PvP resilience stat here, if you look at any TBC PvP guide, they talk almost nonstop about how valuable PvP resilience is. They'll be like, oh, PvP resilience, PvP resilience, PvP resilience. Mind you that these people who are talking are probably on the higher end of the IQ spectrum, but nowhere near where the hell I am on the IQ and, you know, PvP intuition spectrum. This sounds incredibly pretentious to say, but I swear to God, the best way for us game developers to think about this is on an IQ spectrum. So, for example, every time I take an IQ test, I get like 144, 145. When I try to convey my ideas to people, I've noticed that people who are below 130 IQ kind of struggle with it. And then people who are like 120 IQ or lower think not only do they struggle with it, they don't even try, and they like thinking that I'm dumb. So that's just kind of been a thing my entire life. But anyways, these people appear to be smart enough to know that PvP resilience is really good. But when I start trying to say things like, I have all this armor and plate mail gear, being crit less or taking reduced damage on has a negative synergy loop with my damage reduction already, right? So it'd be like, I'm already wearing heavy armor, I'm already taking 50% reduced damage from my armor. Gaining another 30% reduced damage on top of that, it isn't really worth it. And that's not true. It's totally worth it. What the fuck am I talking about? But no, what I'll basically say is like, having 20% damage reduction on my resilience is perfectly fine. I don't need 30% PvP resilience, and because I have heavy armor. They will try to tell me that I'm completely fucking retarded and that you should be investing as many points into PvP resilience as possible, right? So this is kind of what I mean when I say that if it's too complicated for them to understand, I can't convince them that they need to take Classic WoW's equivalent of PvP resilience. But if it's easy enough for them to understand, I can't convince them to devalue the stat because it's too complicated for them to understand. In both cases, we get the same result. The other thing that happens with this build is it has 5 out of 5 Argent Defender and it has a Holy Shield. I'll just read Argent Defender if you don't play Paladin. When you have less than 35% life, all damage taken is reduced by 30%. You also have spell warding over here, which says all spell damage is taken is reduced by 4%. We may or may not have this Dispellable Righteous Fury buff on us, which says all damage taken is reduced by 6%. We have this Holy Shield thing here, which means when we activate it, we take a significantly reduced physical damage on top of that. This thing is built so fucking Tonka Ford fucking tough. This thing is so fucking durable that the value of I want to add even more durability on top of that is pointless. We've hit the durability breakpoint. We're at 13,000 fucking hit points in a world where most classes have like 10k HP. We've hit the durability breakpoint out of the fucking arena, knocked it out of the goddamn park, that I'm now attempting to tell people that the PvP resilience stat is not worth it. And you can see this over here in the gear. So, for example, I've got 2 plus 15 stamina gem slots in every fucking socket on this paladin, completely ignoring the 3-set socket bonus of plus 3 resilience. I have other pieces of gear here where I'm just completely ignoring resilience on this fucking thing. They'll look at this PvP resilience stat of like less than 8% and want to puke. That's what the vast majority of PvP guides and normies are going to take away from this. They're going to assume I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about because it's too complicated for me or for them to understand why I'm devaluing PvP resilience. Okay? So anyways, that's what happened in Season of Discovery, as near as I can tell, is that they did a good job when they adhered to the classic World of Warcraft meta and PvP, I forget the term. When they adhered to the burst damage meta, and they brought all the ratios in line and all the classic World of Warcraft philosophy, which is literally just everything I was talking about in this video over here, right? When they followed that, what ended up happening was it both survived contact with the enemy and it didn't survive contact with the enemy. It didn't survive contact with the enemy because the classic World of Warcraft resilience rating meta was too complicated for the normies to understand. And so they ended up running around with a bunch of glass cannon builds and blowing them and bitching that the PvP meta was too bursty, right? Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, us experienced PvPers were like, it's actually great because I know how to do all this stuff and make I can get out of the bursty PvP meta by wearing enough, hitting certain breakpoints with my HP, getting a certain amount of armor and resistances, and we're good to go. So they made the higher IQ players happy, but they failed to make the lower IQ players happy, and since that's 80% of your player base, we got to chalk that up basically as a fail, right? However, if they had a PvP resilience stat in the game, plus everything they did in Season of Discovery, it probably would have solved the problem instant-fucking-taneously. This is why the PvP resilience stat gives me fucking hope, and it also gives me hope that I can't convince the normies not to take this fucking stat, right? I've seen PvP resilience in versions of classic World of Warcraft before. Every time it's there and it's good as a stat, all the normies take PvP resilience. We cannot convince them not to take PvP resilience. And it just works for them. So I was thinking to myself, here's the observable problem. What are the ways we could potentially solve the observable problem? There are two ways that we can theoretically solve the observable problem of when we design our PvP system well to be, and so we're on the same page here, a good PvP system in World of Warcraft, and probably just about any PvP game there is going to be a system where defense is greater than offense, but it's not greater than offense by very much. Okay, is the best way I can describe it. I'll look for that other video. I'll put the link in the description. But if you're struggling with what I'm trying to say here, or if I fail to say it poorly, go watch that video. I am convinced, looking at a bunch of different PvP systems over the years, that the best PvP game design is that defense is greater than offense, but it is not greater than offense by very much. So what I mean by that is, if you have a well-geared offensive player, a player who's worshiping at the altar of offense, like intelligently built top predator offense build, and then you have the defense version equivalent of that in your PvP system, there should be like a 70% chance that the defense player wins that duel, and a 30% chance that the offense player wins that duel, and that lines up perfectly with human psychology, which is very famously, if a player can't maintain a 30% win rate doing something, then they usually will stop doing it. Yeah. So you want defense to be better than offense, but you don't want it to be that much better than offense. But the other thing apparently we have to put in to the formula is ease of understanding. not bad. Ease of getting that plus defense for the normies. All right. In classic World of Warcraft, the Season of Discovery phase 60, I can't remember the phase 4, maybe I think it was, failed because the plus defense was too complicated for the normies to understand. Okay? It failed because of that, in my estimation. But we can see in TBC and in future game expansions, it doesn't fail because we basically end up giving them PvP resilience. It's very easy for them to comprehend, especially when it comes in the flavor of just like a flat damage reduction. Okay, so we're on this. I look at a minus 20% to a minus 30% damage, flat damage reduction, and a normie will say something like, "That is huge. I'm going to take PvP resilience as a stat. I would be stupid not to." A 120-ish IQ player, so a more intelligent normie, might be able to understand that there is a monstrous difference between a minus 20% damage reduction and a minus 30% damage reduction. A minus 25% damage reduction is a 25% increase to your standing effective HP, and also a 25% increase to any effective healing that you have on your class or catching from somebody else. So a 20% damage reduction is fucking massive, right? But going from 20% to 30%, I know it at 33%. At 33%, it's no longer a 25% increase to your standing effective HP and like how hard you are to blow the fuck up in a burst, right? And any effective healing that you're doing or catching. It is now a 50 fucking percent increase to your standing effective HP, how hard you are to blow up, and then how much healing efficiency you've gone up. Plus 50%. So this fucking thing here, assuming this was 33%, this 20% is a plus 25%, and this 30% is a plus 50%. So there's a literal doubling in the efficiency from A to B. Okay? Some normies are smart enough to understand that. Other normies are not smart enough to understand that. But what they can all agree upon is that if you put it into a neat little package for them, like, it's just PvP resilience, and it's giving me this very easy to understand durability buff here, they can easily start stacking PvP resilience, and they can easily get out of the PvP burst meta, and they can easily get into the more ideal defense burst meta, where offense is still incredibly important, but defense is still king. If we start needing to try to explain to these motherfuckers that it's actually armor in conjunction with resilience, in conjunction with increasing your stamina stat, in conjunction with plus healing. If we have to, if that's the formula to get them to go plus on defense, to get out of the glass cannon versus glass cannon doom meta that nobody wants to be in, that's too much for them to understand. It's too much complexity, makes them feel dumb, blah, 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 blah. They're going to start bitching at you. Okay? And as I stated, I have the exact problem with this in reverse, where in TBC, right, armor still exists, resistances still exist, plus healing gear is incredibly powerful in TBC, plus stamina stuff still exists, and on top of that, resilience exists in the game. So the only thing that's changed going from the classic World of Warcraft meta to a TBC meta, I'll bring in one more factor, is that everything is still there, except now they have the resilience stat. Well, all the normies are essentially worshiping at the altar of the resilience stat as if it matters, and I'm over here being like, no, actually, I'm gonna do what I do in classic and still lean on armor plus healing. You can see that this build down here has what is it? If I put on the plus healing gear, it would be close to 1,500. Let's just do that really quick. Bucket. Where's the plus healing? Okay, there it is. There's the best plus healing one. Let's get a shield. We want a Vengeful Gladiator Reprieve, I think. Yep. Where's that? Oh, no. Let's get a shield. Fuck you. We want armor. Veger Gladiator Readout. Yeah, okay, that's the plus healing one. And then we'll click this thing and give it like 18 stamina or some shit like that, right? Yeah, 18 stamina enchant. Okay, let me scroll up here, okay? So this build has like 30% more HP than normally a paladin does. So it's heavy on the HP. It is devalued PvP resilience, even though it still has a shit ton of PvP resilience for the reasons that we've talked about. The sheer act of putting on the shield increased our PvP resilience by a considerable amount. Is this the plus healing, or is this the Vindicator one? It has quite a bit of spell power, but it's still at... if I was in like pure plus healing gear... so because some of this gear is not pure plus healing gear, some of it's a mix of plus healing and spell damage and healing gear. If I was all in on plus healing gear, this would be a 1700 value, and this spell power would be a 500 spell power under these conditions. But you can see that we're devaluing it for certain reasons. I'm doing this because I know that my plus healing breakpoints for a paladin, the bare minimum is 1400. I prefer 1500 because that allows me to out heal my way through. If I'm getting bad RNG on my heals and my enemies are getting good RNG on their attacks, I like the additional, like, plus 100, plus 150-ish plus healing. I know where my breakpoints are. I know that I need 1300-ish HP breakpoint in order to survive comfortably against like double mage in the arena. I know all these things about my paladin that normies, if I even try to open my mouth and talk to them about, are going to want to puke. And they're just going to want to take the PvP resilience stat instead. But the beauty here, if we look at this, is if we go back to what I'm proposing, which is simplicity on the surface, complexity packed underneath. The PvP resilience stat is giving them simplicity on the surface, that if and when they ever bitch that PvP is too bursty, all the other normies basically just yell at them to increase their PvP resilience. The PvP resilience is good enough as a stat that when they do take the advice of all the other normies and they start stacking PvP resilience, they get out of the burst damage meta, right? And that's going to be the experience of 80% of your player base in PvP, and they'll suddenly be able to, actually enjoy PvP. Will achieve the proper desired state of PvP that we as the game designers have cultivated for them. But in SOD, basically, we cultivated them an ideal game state for PvP, but it was too complicated. The resilience stat effectively was too complicated for them to understand. So they ended up running around in glass cannon bursty builds and started bitching about it, right? However, you can still see that there's enough complexity in the TBC gearing that a player like me can squeeze more value out of their class and start realizing that no, we're going to value stamina more, and we're going to value armor more, and we're going to value all these other things, and suddenly I can start devaluing my PvP resilience as a stat, and squeeze even more value out of my class. The complexity is there if I want to mine it, but to normies, the PvP resilience stat is there to help them compensate if they're too stupid to be able to understand all that stuff, which they are. The other thing that TBC has going on, and this is the other possibility for fixing this problem with them, and I think this is what Season of Discovery probably should have done. Well, in my opinion, Season of Discovery probably should have either had a PvP resilience stat, just like TBC does. I think they eventually kind of did start throwing it in there, but you couldn't really get it on your gear, if I recall correctly. It was like hidden behind the scene, but that's because all the abilities were incredibly super overpowered. The stamina as a stat couldn't keep up with what was going on. The other way to deal with this is TBC does the other thing too, to try to get players out of the burst damage meta, which was they went to chip burst damage meta. So basically, if I throw on my PvP gear and PvP resilience didn't exist as a stat, this gear has more than enough stamina that no class in the entire game can burst me out of existence, right? Most bursts in TBC at best can only take out 70% of a 10,000 hit point HP bar that the vast majority of classes have. Which means it's not like classic World of Warcraft where you have to, in classic WoW, you have to go out of your way to get enough HP to be able to survive the incoming bursts and actually get out of the burst meta. In TBC, the gear just comes with enough stamina that you can't be bursted out of existence, which means that we're no longer in a burst meta. We have devolved. This is a devolution of PvP. It is, I'll find the video, I'll link in the description. It is objectively an inferior PvP game state to be in a chip burst meta than it is to be in a burst meta. The reason for this is because you can have chip burst meta existing inside of a burst meta in your game, but you cannot have burst meta existing inside of a chip burst meta in your game. So, for example, in TBC, when they gave everyone baseline enough HP to survive every class's burst in the entire game, relying on burst to kill people can't really exist in TBC anymore. You have to rely on, like, hurting your enemy for 20, 30% of their life before you can Kamehameha them out of existence. Whereas in classic World of Warcraft, certain classes that have more HP, they just naturally exist in a chip burst meta, whereas everybody else in the game that don't have that much HP, like warriors, for example. You can't burst a warrior 100 to 0 in classic World of Warcraft. They have like 1,000 more fucking hit points, 20% more hit points than any other class in the game. You just can't do it. So they basically exist in a chip burst meta, whereas the rest of us actually have to get our HP bars up high enough before we start transitioning into that chip burst meta. And it's the fact that we can get enough HP and that we have to go out of our way to get enough HP that generates that happy middle ground between, I have enough HP to survive the incoming bursts, but I don't have enough HP to survive the incoming bursts all the goddamn time, like consistently. So like 30% of the time that burst is going to come in and blow my ass up. Whereas in like TBC, I can borderline be butt naked wearing nothing but stamina. I don't have to go out of my way to get enough stamina where there's a 0% chance that there is no 30% chance I'll be exploded, is what I'm trying to say. If my character in TBC came with, let's say, 7,500 hit points before I have to start going out of my way to increase my HP above that, it would be closer to the classic WoW burst meta than it is to the TBC chip burst meta. Because in TBC, bursts are about 7k-ish, and we're running around with like 9k, 10k HP without even having to consider putting more HP on our classes. So we're very clearly not in a burst meta. We're very clearly in the chip burst meta. And it's objectively inferior. But that is another way to get around the fact that these normies will build burst cannony if you let them. Normies basically love to worship at the altar of damage more than they love to worship at the altar of durability. Durability is more complicated for human beings to understand the value of. The value of a plus 30% increase to my damage, plus 10% chance to crit, plus 10% increased attack speed is much easier for them to comprehend. And from their perspective, it's just funner. Which is why you have to give them such a ridiculous stat such as PvP resilience in order to basically beat them in the head the value of the damn thing. So anyways, this kind of gives me hope, in my personal opinion. If Season of Discovery PvP probably would have been perfect during Phase 4 or whenever level 60 came out. I think if the player base, if the classes had a little bit more base HP, we don't want to go too far. We don't want to give them too much base HP, or we end up in exiting burst meta and we start entering chip burst meta. But the same thing, I think it would have been better if they had like 500 to 1,000 more base HP, because at the time, the average burst was 6,000 to 6,500, and the average HP amount that the classes were having before they needed to consider putting more HP, going out of their way to get additional HP on their gear, I do believe was somewhere in the vicinity of like 6,000 or maybe 5,500-ish. I'm going to say 6,000. So with those numbers, normies worshiping at the altar of damage would die to someone bursting on them like 70% of the time. But if they had like 7,500, like 7,000 base HP instead, they would be dying if they all built glass cannons. Yeah, closer to like 33% of the time, because it has to do with like good RNG, right? If they got average RNG on their burst, the target would survive. If they got below average RNG on their burst, the target would survive. And if they got above average RNG on their burst, they would have killed them, which is the ideal place we want the meta to be. If we gave them too much HP, like what happens in TBC, then even with good RNG, they're surviving that anyways. Or the enemy's good RNG, they're surviving the burst comfortably anyways. So burst meta doesn't exist anymore. But one thing that gives me really good hope is that the PvP resilience stat, it's so easy for them to understand and to worship at the altar of, that we don't have to give them an abundance of stamina in order to survive the incoming bursts. We can just give them a stat that's PvP resilience that makes it very, very stupidly fucking easy for them to understand. And their retard complex will basically kick in, and they'll start worshiping at the altar of PvP resilience. And a combination of giving them access to PvP resilience and making it easy for them to understand and not giving them too much HP baseline should have the effect of simple on the surface, but if we keep the resistances, the armor, the plus healing synergy, all that stuff like we see in TBC, the complexity will still be there under the surface for those of us who want to mine that, or for the top tier PvPers, right? So I think we hit our meta almost perfectly there. The other thing that is absolutely necessary, and why PvP resilience is such a good stat to have in your game, so we're clear, I hate classic World of Warcraft when all the other complexity of PvP resilience doesn't exist, and the only stat to worship at the altar of is PvP resilience, because it ends up being easy, simple on the surface, but no complexity underneath, which is bad. The other thing that makes PvP resilience kind of an absolute stat, absolute must stat in your game, is that it helps counter issues between PvE scaling and PvP scaling, if that makes any sense. Let me take a drink of water here. So it is quite a common occurrence in other iterations of other iterations of World of Warcraft, where despite PvP resilience being a stat in the game, and despite PvP resilience being something that all the normies worship at the altar of, the PvE gear is just so much DPS that it's objectively better to use than to wear the PvP. It's objectively better to wear the PvE gear than it is to wear the PvP gear, despite the fact that the PvP gear has resilience on it. PvP gear scaling and PvE gear scaling are kind of in their own worlds. Season of Discovery did a good job of balancing this by giving players an innate PvP damage reduction that wasn't linked to their gear, right? But the mistake was that we also didn't have PvP resilience on top of that as a stat that the normies could worship at the altar of, instead of worshiping at the altar of offense, because the defense stat in the game is too complicated for them to understand, right? So the way you balance PvP and you reach good PvP game design is, and I'm gonna do this in sequence. Number one, adhere to a philosophy of simplicity on the surface, simple and easy on the surface, complexity underneath. We achieve simplicity on the surface by having PvP resilience as a stat in the game. We balance the PvP math in the game using the crap that we're talking about in this video over here to reach this idealized PvP utopia, I guess we could say, where when people are bursting, there's at least a 30%, 25-30% chance that the burst will kill even a person who is worshiping at the altar of PvP resilience and doing everything correctly. But there's still like a 70% chance that they will survive that incoming burst, and the combat will evolve from there. I think 30% is a little high. You probably want it closer to like 20% chance that they can kill them. And you want the PvP to... you both want a chance for them to die in that burst, but you don't want that the chance to die so high in that burst that it doesn't take the player bursting multiple bursts before they can mathematically finally kill the player. So at 30% burst chance, he needs 3 bursts before he can mathematically kill the opposing player. That gives a lot of time and space for there to be counterplay and all that stuff and blah 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 blah. Which is why you want it to be 30% and not like 50%. At 50%, homie needs 1 burst or less, and mathematically he's gonna kill the guy. We want to achieve that through giving our players enough base HP on their classes that a combination of worshiping at the altar of the PvP resilience stat and them having just enough base built-in HP will achieve this ideal gameplay state of 70-30. I'm just going to call it 70-30 from now on. Okay. Then we want all the additional durability stuff to still exist in the game. We want the complexity. We don't want to strip it out. So we want resistances to be a thing in the game. We want our talent trees to be a thing in the game. We want armor to be a thing in the game. Damage mitigation stats to be in the game. We want plus healing to be in the game. We want interesting and powerful PvP trinkets to be in the game, both offensively and defensively. We want the complexity to exist there. So there's this entire another hidden world of both offensive buffs and defensive buffs that can be used underneath the surface to shift this meta in favor of it one way, this way or that, which is what we get in classic World of Warcraft, right? Then on top of all of this, we want to have a hidden or not so hidden PvP resilience number that the game devs themselves can adjust at their whim, which is what we had in Season of Discovery, to help counter any issues that might arise to disrupt this idealistic PvP state from manifesting itself due to PvE scaling getting out of control, right? So, for example, if the PvE scaling is getting completely... Basically, we've set up this ideal PvP gameplay state specifically for the players are wearing their goddamn PvP gear, and they're smart enough to worship at the altar of PvP resilience. Okay? We've established that. Now, if the PvE gear starts scaling into Narnia, we need a way to devalue that somehow, or to increase the player's durability. So I wouldn't even want to see something like in Season of Discovery, we basically all had a hidden PvP resilience stat. And if they some versions of World of Warcraft have a PvP resilience stat on top of having a resilience stat that the game devs can tweak for all the classes, I would rather have a stat that the game devs can tweak that reduces the amount of damage that the PvE gear does, rather than having a resilience stat that does the same thing, but it does the same thing both for the PvE stats and the PvP stats. If I had to point to a point in time where the PvP system, the meta might have been shit, but the way the developers could tweak the meta was at its best, would probably be in Warlords of Draenor. In Warlords of Draenor, they had this weird stat system where the PvP gear would gain stats. It would become more powerful by the sheer act of engaging in PvP. And that was the game dev's way of trying to keep the PvE stats from getting out of hand. So you can either do it so that the PvP... I just want a hidden stat that nerfs a PvE gear. So it's basically like, yo, if you're taking this PvE gear into PvP, just know that it's going to be minus a 25% stats when engaging in PvP. And I want it to be, I want the sheer act of them engaging in PvP to have visual negative modifiers on their gear in case they're too stupid to know this. But what should happen is that when people bitch about their gear sucking in PvP, or about why they... because normies will bitch to other normies, right? So that when one normie complains to other normies that his gear has 10,000 hit points in PvE, but he's noticing that when he goes into PvP, he's only got, you know... it's actually going to be like 8,200, because 80% would be a 25% reduction, but whatever. I'm going to say 80%. He notices he only has 8,000 hit points in PvP, but when he's not in PvP, he has 10,000. What the fuck is going on? Another normie can tell him that currently, at current patch, the PvE gear has a minus 20% stat modifier or efficiency modifier to it when it's taken into PvP. This is something that normies can understand. It's simple. It's easy. There's a very a clear visual indicator. Blah 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 blah. And it is by far the best fucking way, in my opinion, to help keep the separation. To help keep the PvE balance state, which is the PvP balance state, which is very delicate. Right the fuck where you want it to be as a game dev. Despite the fact, and then let the PvE get meta be like kind of all over the fucking place, right? You can literally just go in and tweak one stat and be like, "Oh, it might get so bad, I shit you not, that the stat will go up to like minus 80% to the PvE gear when it's taken into PvP." I shit you not. That might actually happen. But what am I trying to say here? As a game designer, we want to give the players of our game as much influence over how their character plays in PvP as possible. But at the same time, they're kind of too stupid to understand a lot of it, so we have to give them some simple things that they can very easily worship at the altar of and do just fine. At the same time, the balance state is so delicate that we can't really afford PvE itemization to come in and be like the Kool-Aid Man crashing through the wall and going, oh yeah, and just fucking things up. So we need a mechanic that the game devs can tweak to help keep the PvE gear in line. The philosophy that a lot of Classic WoW devs have tried to adhere to over the years is that PvP gear gotten from PvP should be the best gear for PvP. And that is not the worst idea in the world, but it's also really good idea if the PvE gear is also really good in PvP, especially for players who can milk the complexity out of the game. But you don't want it to be so good that it's just objectively better, right? So we need some kind of hand on the dial to be able to do that. I do not like the PvP resilience stat that was proposed in Season of Discovery, because that's the hand on the dial of both the PvP gear's value and the PvE gear's value simultaneously. Whereas if it was separated and the dial was just for the PvE gear, it would be much easier to tweak. Like, I can buff the PvE gear by nerfing I can buff the PvP gear by nerfing the PvE gear. And I can buff the PvP gear just by literally giving you updated PvP gear when another patch comes out. Or snapping my fingers, increasing the value of like the resilience stat if I don't think it's high enough. Normies will be able to understand that. People who worship at the altar of all this additional stuff will hate that. But to be honest with you, we will survive. Anyways, that's all I have to say on the video here, Deus Fault. But I've been watching all these videos about people talking about, what they want to see in Classic Plus and yada, yada, yada. And the general takeaway is that overly complicated Classic World of Warcraft on the surface is a bad idea. You want to keep it simple on the surface. You can have complexity in your game, but we need to keep it hidden from the players. What else is there to say? Yeah, and then there's those two incentive structures that are at war with each other. One is if we played the game way too much and we no longer find simplicity fun, we can go down a bad rabbit hole of increasing game complexity as game designers, because that's what we think is fun. Then there is the everyone at a game company is highly incentivized to make things more complicated than they need to be, because that's what impresses your boss and your higher-ups. Simplicity does not impress, complexity impresses. When in reality, it should be, we can have complexity, we can have our fucking cake and eat it too, but we need the simplicity on the surface, and we need all the complexity underneath the surface, and we need to make sure that just how bad players are at the game is hidden from them. Because again, they're stupid. Complex things they do not like. It hurts their egos. It hurts their pride. And then they'll start bitching about things that actually are completely fine with the game, but it's not fine for them, if that makes any sense. So I think Classic WoW philosophy needs to adhere to simple on the surface, complexity packed underneath. I've given a bunch of examples of how to achieve this, both in PvP and PvE. What else is there to say? There was one last thing. There was one thing that I was missing. Complexity. Packed underneath. Oh, yeah, the hiding. You got to have your systems hiding the fact that bad players are bad at the game. I think Season of Discovery did that amazingly. With Classic WoW does it really well with its PvP gearing system. Because you can be terrible at PvP and still get the best PvP gear in the game. TBC does a terrible job of this with its arena system of hiding the fact that you're bad at PvP from the player base. Both Classic WoW and Season of Discovery did a really good job of, in PvE of hiding the fact that you are bad at PvE. By basically, you know, with the whole cosmetic thing and the bosses are dying, we're getting the same quality of gear. Basically, you want to avoid locking best statted gear in game behind a skill or an intelligence check. You don't want to gatekeep it behind that kind of a barrier, that kind of a wall. The normies will absolutely fucking lose their shit on that subject. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to end the video here. Deus Vult. My brain is completely dead now. Like, I literally am trying to make points, but I just can't do it. That's telling me that we're closing in on the 2-hour mark of this video. Fuck, it's 2 hours and 5 minutes. Anyways, I'll end the video here. Deus Vult. Yeah. If you want to see me blather away more about this from an actual, like, you know, game a theory crafting perspective, or the next video I'm going to make is going to be about trying to convince the Paladin player base in TBC that this is the gear that they should be taking. Here's the breakpoints they should be hitting. Here's why. Blah, 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 blah. This is why this build is absolutely fucking amazing. I'll end up I'll be blathering away for hours about things that 80% of the Paladin player base are not going to adhere to, even though they should, because they're just normies, man. Like I don't know what to tell you. Oh, there's one final point I wanted to make. There's going to be times in your game dev career, your game designer career, your game dev career, where you create a really good system for the players. There's nothing wrong with the system that you've played for the player. You've developed for the players. You've developed them the best PvP system. Oh shit, sorry. You've developed them the best PvP system. You've developed them the best PvE this or the best PvE that. Everything is perfectly well designed. The only error that you've made is that it's too complicated for the normies to understand. Therefore, they're just not doing it, right? And then they're going to turn around and bitch at you that you're a bad game designer. From a game designer perspective, we're going to be looking down at our player base, like literally in this case, down at our player base. We're going to look at our player base and say, there's nothing wrong with the system that I designed. These fucking players are just too retarded to know what to do. Which is both true and wrong at the same time. The wrong thing about that is there's got to be ways for us to help the player base, even though they're fucking retarded, and it is important to remember that they are stupid. So complicated things are off the table for these guys. For us to give them what they need in order to make the meta that we're trying to put them in or whatever work, that they are smart enough to enjoy and digest. Which is why I think PvP resilience as a stat is probably the best example of this. You could have the opposite of, theoretically, you could have the opposite of PvP resilience stat in your game. You could call it, like, you know, PvE competency, or some shit like that. We'll call it PvE comp for short. Or like, or basically it's the opposite of PvP resilience, where it's basically saying, hey, this stat means that your gear performs better in PvE. Or like the sheer act of entering a raid or a dungeon buffs the shit out of this gear, right? But if you enter a battleground, it doesn't do shit. If you're in the open world, it doesn't do shit. You could very easily have that stat in your game, which would be another way for you to help manage the complexities of this back and forth nonsensory. All right, well, my brain is done. That's all I got. Love you all. If you managed to get through this video, you are a complete fucking psychopath. Yeah, I know I just sat here for 2 hours blathering away about it, and I'm probably like, king of the psychopaths. But yeah, if you're still here, my hat's off to you, and Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, all right. Deus Vult. That's all I got to say. All right, peace, guys.